opulence, while most of the Kenyans were struggling. And so some of those offending proposals, like there was this obscene proposal called circulation tax, that if you already have a car and then you are driving around town, you're going to pay an extra tax. So those are obscene and unacceptable proposals were in fact removed from the finance bill. And by the time the actual bill was presented in the House for debate and adoption, those obscene proposals had already been removed. But by then, the environment was polluted by misinformation and disinformation. And there's nothing much the president would have done to reverse the mood. But really, when you do a postmortem, the core issues affecting Kenya today, one would say that we have a leadership crisis, both at the national level as well as the county level. And you see, the definition of a leader is that you are supposed to identify the interests and aspirations of the nation.
Yes. And
come up with a strategic plan. Then when you have this strategic plan, you identify financial resources and you identify human capital. In identifying human capital and financial resources, all your priorities must be sensitive to your citizens' interest and aspiration. Because when you're coming up with a finance bill or you're coming up with these budgets, it's supposed to serve the interests of the citizens, no else. So you may
have government for the people.
Yeah, you may have a very beautiful proposal as a leader, but if those proposals are not serving the citizens will not buy them. So it's incumbent on the leadership to ensure that if you're coming up with a proposal, say you want to put up a nuclear factory, a nuclear power plant in Kenya.
Right.
The Kenyans must understand the imports of that power plant. If they do not understand, Kenyans will always smell a rat. So last year, I think, under President Ruto had admitted that he had a crisis of policy communications. And one of the tenets of policy communications is that you must carry along the stakeholders. Like, for instance, when the Gen Z look at the finance bill or they look at the budget proposals, do they see their selfish interest captured in that? Part of the reason why they went to the streets, they said, well, a minute, you don't capture our interests. Like a few days ago now, we understand that State House is going to get about 0.8 billion for renovation. So people are asking, wait a minute, is this budget allocation for State House a priority at this stage? And you know, they say from the time President Ruto took office, State House has been undergoing a renovation almost on a daily basis. So people are beginning to ask, what is the logic behind this? So it's therefore incumbent on the government to come and tell us why they're renovating State House. You know, it's the seat of power. Again, you can't have the president putting up in a dilapidated setting.
Correct.
But you know, you must not assume that people know. You must convince them. That is why we say that communication is a key success factor. And on that, Kenya Kwanza seems to have scored a D-. They failed. You know, Kenya Kwanza has come up with amazing policy interventions. Like you can talk about the healthcare reforms, you can talk about housing reforms. But if there is no policy communication, then Kenyans will smell a rat. Now, number two, today we are witnessing incidents that paint a picture of politicians who are opportunists. You see, like for instance, there is supposed to be a Gen Z day to remember young men and women who came out last year to do the demonstration, peaceful demonstration, but because of police brutality, they're not here today. But who are the first people in the streets this morning? You saw politicians. You saw Chief Justice Maraga early in the morning. So you wonder, why are these politicians coming to take advantage of a day which ordinarily belongs to Gen Z? And these are the people who are expressing themselves and pronouncing their issues. And you see now this is the tragedy we have with politicians in Kenya. Wherever they see an opportunity, they want to come and grab it, such that there is a high probability that they're suffocating the voice of Gen Z and they're suffocating the voice of young Kenyans who want to express themselves. So it's, I mean, I found this amazing, almost comical, that the first people in the streets this morning were these politicians. And guess what? They were in the company of their top-of-the-range vehicles, they had their bottles of water, and they had their security guys. So they actually came to do what one you may describe as a tick-a-box ceremonial purposes, because they want to be seen to be associating with Gen Z. But one may want to pose a question. Have these politicians offered any concrete proposals?
You seem to find something mischievous, almost exploitative in this, would you say?
Yeah, and you know they say in strategic comms that when you've got a brand which is doing very well, by engaging in brand association, you become a beneficiary of that. Today should have been left to the Gen Z and the young men and women who are demonstrating to express themselves, to pronounce themselves on policy issues. And as it were, the definition of news is that it's about personalities and prominence. So there's a very high chance that it's the politicians who are going to get a lot of the coverage, and the youth issues are going to be suffocated. Now, the people we are remembering today, they lost their lives because they were fighting for Kenya, there's a very high chance nobody's going to talk about them. Why? Because people like Chief Justice Maraga have suffocated the air.
In fact, that really is where I wanted to take the conversation as at this particular moment. We